Singapore is one of the most impressive success stories in the development of nations in the 20th century. This country began with total poverty and deprivation and entered the 21st century as one of the world's most important cities, rivaling London, New York, and Tokyo. Singapore's economy is outstanding, even compared to other larger Asian tigers. At the same time, it has an area of 728 square kilometers. Today, within 10 minutes, you will learn about a country with a GDP per capita exceeding $100,000. A country that ranks third in terms of the number of rich people per capita, second only to Switzerland and Hong Kong. But at the same time, it has a tough, authoritarian regime. Its social policy is both praised and harshly criticized. There is a place for judicial flogging, the death penalty, and even legalized slavery. But first things first. Hello, this is the backside of Singapore, which is not depicted in the guidebooks. Let's get started. So today, I would like to invite you to travel to Southeast Asia, to the city country of Singapore. This is an amazing city of cutting-edge technology where you seem to be transported to the future. However, the starting point was quite sad. Just 60 years ago, the country was one of the poorest countries. The port was in ruins, people lived in slums, and plain rice was considered a luxury. However, before the Second World War, Singapore was a British colony, and things were not so bad. Thanks to its strategic location at the intersection of trade routes between Europe and Asia, it was an incredibly prosperous and wealthy port city. However, World War II dealt a devastating blow to Singapore. It was captured by the Japanese Empire, which fought on the side of Germany. The 3-year occupation by the Japanese authorities from 1942 to 1945 severely devastated the island city. Most of the infrastructure, such as the electricity grid and water supply, was destroyed. Thousands of buildings were reduced to rubble, and the same was true of Singapore's main gem, its port. This eventually led to a complete collapse of the economy. There was a critical shortage of resources, food, and a high percentage of unemployment. The return of the British did not change the situation. Finally, everything ended with the decolonization and independence of Singapore in 1963. Yes, the post-war period was extremely difficult. To give you an idea of how difficult, Singapore was dependent on Malaysia for fresh water. But in one generation, this country managed to make a giant leap in its development from the third world to the first world. The creator of the Singaporean economic miracle was Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, who ruled for 31 years. First and foremost, he solved the problem of the colossal unemployment rate. When the British Army left the country, Singapore lost more than 30,000 jobs and 20% of its GDP. Therefore, in 1960, 20 years before China or India, Singapore opened up to the world. Lee Kuan Yew placed a high premium on foreign investment and provided businesses and factories with the best conditions. One of the key conditions was cheap labor. The next component was zero tolerance for corruption. When asked, "How did you manage to fight corruption?" Lee Kuan Yew answered, "Start by locking up 3 of your friends." You know exactly why, and they know why. Today, it is a high-tech city with a powerful economy. Is living there a dream of any person? Perhaps we cannot know for sure. Let me explain why. The downside of this economic success is that the country has been ruled by an authoritarian regime since its independence, and the ruling party has never changed. This logic is explained by the fact that Singapore was in a difficult situation at the beginning of its independence. And to save the country, the authorities needed total control. Many years have passed since then, but the control continues to tighten. All local newspapers, radio stations, and TV channels are owned by companies that are affiliated with the state. All editorial boards support state policy, and criticism is rarely published. Large online news sites must obtain licenses and remove prohibited content. This is strictly monitored by the Media Development Authority. It is essentially engaged in censorship and can revoke the license of any media outlet under the pretext of racial, religious tensions, or the threat of terrorism. It also imposes restrictions on political films and television programs. Singapore has laws in force that make it quite easy to make life difficult for any opposition manifestations. For example, the Law on Protection Against Lies and Manipulations on the Internet. This law allows any minister to demand correction or restriction of access to content that they consider controversial. The government repeatedly demanded that opposition comments be censored during the 2020 parliamentary election campaign. Another law is the Law on Foreign Interference. It provides for the protection of the domestic information space from foreign harmful manipulative influence. According to this law, even those journalists who openly and honestly work for trusted foreign news agencies may face prosecution. They just have to criticize the government in some way. There are a number of other laws that allow arrests without charge or trial for up to 2 years, which can be extended indefinitely. Would you be satisfied with such a life when you are offered social benefits in exchange for democratic values and freedoms? Although it is difficult to objectively assess the level of these social benefits, we have already understood how social information from the state works. Therefore, in order to understand what the life of ordinary Singaporeans is like, I analyzed the materials of independent travel bloggers. Are you still with us? Then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There's a lot of interesting stuff coming up. Meanwhile, we turn to the next page of our guide. Do you know what the average income of a Singaporean is per month? $5,383. Well, why are you trying to tell us that Singapore is not a great place to live? You may be asking. Take your time, let's run through the cost of living. Let's say you wanted to buy a car that costs $20,000. And now let's do the math. Customs clearance in Singapore will cost you 30% of the car's price. Add the registration fee of 100 to 180%. There are also taxes, but that's not all. To drive a car, you need to buy a license to own a car, which starts at $70,000. As a result, you pay about $110,000 for a car that costs $20,000. And you have to buy this license again every 10 years. Singaporeans have to save for 5 to 6 years just to make the first installment. Such conditions are due to the fact that Singapore is small. And in such a radical way, the authorities solve the problem of traffic and air pollution. The high cost of a car also deepens inequality. For wealthy Singaporeans who buy a Jaguar, Porsche, or Ferrari, the additional fees and permits don't seem too expensive compared to the cost of a luxury car. That's why there are more expensive cars on the streets and fewer budget cars. Housing there is also one of the most expensive. For example, renting one room on the outskirts of the city can cost $1,200. Due to the high level of competition, you have to work hard to live in a more or less normal life. And labor legislation in Singapore was created as if specifically for workaholics. People work 44 hours a week here. That is, if you don't want to work on Saturday and Sunday, you have to work almost 9 hours a day during the week. This is almost the highest rate in the world. This pace of pursuit of a better life causes stress and mental problems among the population. The locals even have a separate term, kiazu, which means the fear of being the last. It is also a fear of failure and not living up to parental expectations. In order to somehow relieve the local population, the state created a profession called helper. In Singapore, it is customary to live with a domestic helper. As a rule, they are Filipinos. They agree to such work because of poverty in their country. These women are forced to leave their homes, families, and children in order to earn some money. And these are not just governesses. Yes, their duties are ordinary, cleaning, ironing, putting things in their places. buying groceries, cooking, washing dishes, and taking children to kindergarten, to classes, and taking them for a walk. But the rules raise questions. A helper must live with the family he or she works for. If he spends the night away from home, he is fined. Every apartment in Singapore is designed for a helper. Usually, there is a small room or cubbyhole next to the kitchen, in most cases without a window and air conditioning where they sleep. They have 1 day off per week and, attention, 1 week of vacation per year. The cost of such an assistant will be lower if you hire a cleaner and a nanny separately. The basic salary starts at $650 per month, and you need to pay for basic health insurance, mobile communication, food, and a ticket home once a year. Those helpers who agree to talk on camera are happy. It's their chance to feed their families. We keep in mind the censorship in Singapore. However, there are still stories of these women becoming victims of harassment by their employers. On the one hand, no one really forces them and they are paid money, unlike slaves. But you must admit that the very concept of such a phenomenon somehow does not coincide with the country's progressive vector. So, as we can see, even this high-tech, extremely developed city has many contrasts. Given all the shortcomings, it is important to understand that Singapore still remains one of the most attractive countries for living and doing business in the region. The main concern is the authoritarian regime and the immutability of the government. The world does not yet know examples where this world would not end in disaster. Already today, many similar regimes use Singapore in their propaganda as an example of a successful dictatorship.